Of you, Mr. Chairman, of using those powers.
I call the honourable member David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly have. Mr. Chair, I'd like to just begin by reflecting on a couple of comments from the government speakers who have referred to the timing of this debate. The fact is, yes, we understand that on April 17th the police lose the powers they currently have under the Video Surveillance Temporary Measures Bill. Apparently, if that happens, anarchy will run loose in the world and it'll be a tragic thing. I think it's worth commenting on the fact that this government set the timing for this shift, for the April 17th changeover. This bill has been around in some form or other for quite a number of years. I don't suggest it's not a complex bill. It is. We absolutely support the notion of bringing together what's been described as a jumble of legislation, bits and pieces of rules and provisions spread across, 50-odd pieces of legislation is seldom helpful. Nevertheless, there has been significant time available to the government, and I think I object to the fact that somehow the opposition speakers are having blame sheeted home to them because this government now only has a couple of weeks to sort itself out and get some legislation in place. I don't personally feel any responsibility for that. This government has been in control of the House program for over 3 years, and I think they do well to recall that. So this part deals substantially with police powers, the powers that police will have under this legislation. A great deal of this part refers to the actions that police may perform without warrants. It's entirely appropriate that the police should, of course, be able to conduct some activities to act in the spur of the moment. Crime and offending does act in real time. It's inappropriate to constrain the police too much. But it's all about the question of balance. How much is too much? And as I've said all the way through, this bill seems to lean towards enabling the diminishing of people's rights rather than have a clear sense that there are some absolute limits to that. I was concerned by an earlier speaker from the government who made a comment in passing to the effect that he didn't have a lot of interest in the human rights of those who are not involved or who are not interested in obeying the law. A similar sentiment seems to pervade this bill, that somehow people who offend or even who are accused of offending somehow should have their basic human rights compromised. Of course, when people have offended or are accused of serious offences, we do put limits on their liberties. We collectively exercise the right to restrain them, in some cases to imprison them, take away their personal liberty, and that's as it should be. But the notion that somehow even people who are imprisoned do not retain human rights is absolutely anathema to me, and I suspect most other people in this House. I suspect that if we found ourselves one day in a society where people's rights are diminished simply because they have committed crime, I think that as a society none of us would actually want to live in. Human rights are fundamental to being human, and we need to recognise that and understand that and act accordingly in all of these legislative measures that we're putting through. I'd like briefly to reflect on one particular section of this part, Section 5, which is a couple of paragraphs. The heading, Section 5, Internal Searches Generally Prohibited. And in 1 and 2, it goes on to say a constable must not conduct an internal search of any part of the body of any person except with that person's consent. They may look into their mouths for presumably looking for concealed drugs, whatever it may be. I note that the Minister's SOP deletes that clause in its entirety. It takes away the general prohibition on internal body searches. And I'd be very interested in finding out from the Minister why she has chosen to do that. I would hope it's for a reason that the prohibition on internal searches are covered off in some other. I would hope that she has found it's unnecessary. I sincerely hope the Minister is not proposing that constables should have the right to conduct internal searches of people in the way that is prohibited currently in the bill. And I'd be very interested in hearing some commentary on that. The extent of the warrantless provisions in this section are extensive, they're comprehensive. There's reference to issues around about weapons, about knives, guns and all the rest of it, and I think generally, yes, we can accede to that. That is a significant matter. Thank you.
I call the Honourable Member Tim McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr Chair.